Hello and welcome back to Inquisitor Martyr. Last time we ended up doing just some little intel missions, and actually that was the last time I was able to be in Season 3. Season 3 is now officially ended. If I were to go to the main menu, this character is actually no longer seasonal, so there's no more challenges, we don't have the side stuff or anything like that. We still have the buff because we don't have Season 4 as of the time of this recording, and there isn't a set date for when we'll get it. At that time, I don't know, I'll probably fire up a Tech Adept. If you guys want, I can keep running the Psyker, and, you know, one day be Psyker, one day be Tech Adept, or whatever it may be. But until then, we're just going to keep going, probably just run some more intel missions. Not feeling a Void Crusade just yet. I want to try to get at least a couple more levels in me. Since we were doing decent, but towards the tail end it started to get a little bit of a struggle. And speaking of like gear and stuff, I actually modified the main implant, so now I have 75% damage bonus on AoE skills. I didn't put Psalm codes in because I didn't find any that I really liked. For a 3 slot, there's nothing that really stands out. So I thought, you know what? I saw that it was a 25% AoE damage boost and thought, well, I am AoE, so why not just keep going with that? And just kind of leverage that and hope for the best at this point.
You are right on target, Inquisitor. The Argus scans show multiple heavy weapon platforms in close vicinity, keeping the Imperium forces under fire. Act quickly, or soon there will be no one left to thank your valiant effort, before they get mind scrubbed anyway.
So I picked the, what is it? The Void Shards. Or no, the Imperium Seals and Tarot cards. Because I want to get Uther's Tarot maxed. Even though if I do start a new seasonal character, they won't benefit from it. I'd still just like to have it maxed for my main runs. You know, it's something that I find is convenient and nice to have. And I personally can't find a reason not to finish it off. Damage isn't bad. I mean, using gobblers as a litmus test isn't the best test either. I had a good laugh. There was a article I saw where people were talking about... what was it? It was... in games, you know how you'll have to like sneak through a crack or go through something and it just kind of takes away your agency as a player because you're busy having to, you know, just go through the animation of crawling through something. People were asking, you know, why do we have this still? Isn't this kind of a dated thing? Why are we still kind of masking loading screens? And some developers were like, oh, well, it's not really masking a loading screen. What it is it's hemming a player in so that we can unload part of the map. And I'm like, that... yes, that's not a loading screen, but it is a loading... like, a loading effect. Because you're using that time to slow down the player movement, limit what they can see to load stuff in front while unload stuff behind. You know, it's kind of a weasel word way of getting around saying, like, yeah, they're loading screens. We still need them. I mean, some people brought up Mass Effect, how their loading screens were elevators. And I know in Mass Effect 1, you'd kind of sit there and have your teammates kind of talk, and sometimes you'd hear the in-universe news, which I actually liked. I thought that was a really cool way to still have loading screens, but it was done in a fun way that also let the game do some exposition without just beating you over the head like mid-fight or something, so you can hear it loud and clear. But it was really funny because the writer for the article was bringing up how it still exists apparently in God of War Ragnarok. Personally, I don't really care. I haven't liked God of War since, you know, they ended their whole Olympian saga. I felt like them drudging it back up and being like, now he's fighting Norse gods. It felt like they were just trying to revive the franchise. Like they had nothing else to make, and they didn't want to really let that franchise go. Even though I think God of War 3 was a fitting ending for the franchise, instead of just putting it on life support, because if they make a third... Let's say Ragnarok has a third game. Okay, then they're going to have this same problem again. What do? You're done. Are we going to have Kratos versus the Egyptian gods? Kratos versus the Japanese gods? We can have him throwing down against Amaterasu? You know, it gets tiring. Because unlike some franchises where, you know, you can start diversifying, like, let's say Twisted Metal. Twisted Metal has a storyline, but it's been redone so many times, and it's been so weird that you can get away with whatever. Yeah, you got characters like Sweet Tooth that you need to have, but past that, you can just do whatever. But God of War, it's pretty straightforward what you have to have, what you have to do, and it becomes very formulaic. But people are like, oh, why do you hate Sony so much, and all this stuff, and I'm like, I may have a PlayStation 5, but I hate Sony at this point. You know, we don't have Mag 2, we don't have SOCOM, we don't have a new Resistance. All we got is Horizon Zero Dawn and God of War. I ain't happy. You know, I expected more out of Sony, and they're just kind of sitting on their hands. It feels like, if you remember the BlizzCon announcement for Diablo Immortals, the don't you guys have phones? It feels kind of like that, where it's like, don't you guys want single player? And it's like, yeah, but when all you make is single player games and you have a good library of multiplayer games, I kind of look at those multiplayer games and I'm like, hey, what the hell are you doing? Why don't we get one of those? You know, Killzone. Killzone's just sitting there. You can go back to, like, Killzone 1 and just tell someone else's story. You can go to Killzone 2's part. Because honestly, Killzone 3, or not Killzone 3, Killzone Shadowfall's story got really stupid. Being like, oh, now, because Helgen is destroyed, we divided up Vecta, I think it was, in half, and now the Helghast get half, and the Vectans get half, but oh wait, they don't like each other. And it's like, yeah, you had a war. It doesn't matter, refugees or not, they're not exactly gonna be all too happy with you. And the whole story just ends up degrading into stuff like that. No, I think they could have done a larger scale, more Battlefield style game and been successful. But we don't get that. God, this was a short run.
You are still alive and more or less
I meant to hit the map.
That's a success,
yeah.
I guess.
Hey, we got a level. Alright, let's just nuke all the low-level stuff we know won't be useful. Stunned enemies, that's very particular. Only 4, needs to be a 5 ability. Only 4, and I already have a chest piece that gives me a lot of good stuff. So that's not really that great. Shame, because that would have been neat. God, ever since they did that back-end change, the game has been way laggier. Alright, so we can keep going with dots, just to boost the fire damage. Or we can put more... Yeah, we'll start putting a bit more into AoE, because I'd like to get that bonus radius. Because that'll be really handy. And we'll just jump back into Intel. Hey, that's what I'm talking about. Malleus reputation. Give me rep for the factions. It's gonna kinda suck, but I don't care. All reward bonuses for this. We are just gonna not bump the level up any higher. We're gonna peak out as high as we can. So we need, what do we got? 80, 85s. Yeah, and this is why I want to boost these cards more. Because their effects get better, and that's all I'm looking for here is just better payouts so that Malleus rep can go higher. Anytime, game.
Strategic targets located in the area. With a surgical strike, we can break their chain of command and harvest valuable data.
Yeah, I don't like this lag. Like I said, it's not good. When I'm sitting here and the game is just... It's not even like hitching, it's just sitting. And when it's just something as simple as, oh, I want to load a mission. And the game has to stop and just kind of plod along. That's not a good fix. I don't know, like I said, I don't know what they did. I can tell you here now it was probably not good or not executed correctly. Because beforehand I did not have that long. That was a couple seconds of just waiting. And that used to never happen. Oh, I saw another interesting thing. So, apparently, if you have a an Xbox Series S, you know, the ones without a disc port or disk drive, Microsoft's trying to cut support for that. Because it turns out those things were also a more cheaply made and less powerful system, and apparently game devs are saying they've had to like kneecap some of their performance so that it can work on those. And even Microsoft, internally, they're trying to slowly get out of using it. And a friend of mine had showed me the stuff about it, and I had told him, you know, this generation needs to be extended 3 to 4 years of life. Even though your average console gen is 6 to 8 years, this system needs to go 9 to 12. As shitty as that may be, I think it is needed. Because when you really look at it, we're still making games for last gen. And that, I think, is a problem. Because this console gen has not been able to stand on its own. We're still having shortages. I'm still seeing stuff regarding, like, you can get in through this, like, Best Buy program to get a pre-order on a PS5. I'm like, it has been years. If we're still struggling to meet demand, this is a problem. You can't expect people to buy the next gen if they can't even buy this gen. You know, there aren't enough games. We're still sitting waiting for developers to make something. And, you know, this is all a big problem. And it doesn't help when you get news like that. Oh, by the way, they made a gimped version of a system and now don't want to support it anymore because they realized, oh, turns out making a worse, cheap version of a system isn't a good idea. But that never should have happened in the first place. You know, this is a matter that shouldn't have had to happen. But of course, here we are. It's annoying. Like I've said, because it makes this gen worse. And I think I've mentioned it. I've had my PS5 for a year, and the only PS5 game I own is Elden Ring. And part of that is because the games that have been coming out just aren't interesting. You know, oh, do you want to play a continuation of this franchise that I didn't get into initially? It's like, no, I'd rather not. Or it's, you know, part of it is the $70 price tag on games. I've said it time and again. Cut out the fat. These studios can probably shave off some of their staff to reduce costs. Because I can guarantee, the way things are going, I would not be surprised if we start seeing like EA or Blizzard or someone start trying to move their production like overseas. If they can get equal or honestly just equal or similar quality from, you know, guys in India or out of South Korea, you think they're not going to take those opportunities? Oh, I don't have to pay some numbnuts in, you know, the Bay Area $100,000 when I can pay another dude in, you know, New Delhi $40,000. They're gonna take it. Simple as that. And I await that time, because it's going to be one of those things where the industry did it to itself. Yes, people should be paid fairly, but I do think part of it is cost of living. You know, you don't need to be in the Bay Area. You really don't. What, realistically, I've always said this, what does living in a place like that give you that other places don't? Like, oh, you can live in the Bay Area and, you know, San Francisco and have designated streets where people shit. Cool, I could move to Kansas and never have to deal with that in my life. I could move to Colorado, not have to deal with that. I can move to places where, you know, $1 million gets me more than a 1,200 square foot quote-unquote house. You know, I know people, and I've had family who've lived in California over the years, and not once have they lived alone, or just, like, them and a spouse. One friend I have currently living in California lives in a house with at least 4 other people. I had a relative who lived there back in like the 90s and had to live with like 6-8 people. You know, at a certain point you look at it and it's like, nah, maybe moving out of this place is probably best for business and best for everyone. Not to mention, I see stuff where they're like, oh, you can live in this like communal house with, you know, your private area is your little bed pod. And I'm like, I'm not living in the pod. You can't make me. And it's always funny to me because it's this idea of like, oh, we're gonna drive down the cost of living. I'm like, no. By just cramming people together, you're not doing as much as just getting people out. Because the demand is still there. You've just kind of tweaked the supply. And it's not by much, really. Like, people, they're trying to reinvent the wheel of housing. And that has to be the goofiest thing I've ever seen. Like, oh, it's the hip new way of living. You get to have a bunk bed. I'm sorry, I'm a grown man. I'm not having a bunk bed. Man, I'm hoping some of this loot is actually going to pay out here. Because I'm chewing through people left and right, but... I mean, it is a higher difficulty, so I should be getting better stuff, in theory. Oh, I saw another interesting thing for those of you who care about D&D. This, I thought, was amusing, because there's an article going, oh... In a new book, they're gonna make it so you don't have, or like demons don't have to be bad, demons and devils. And I sat there thinking, yeah, they've always never had to just be evil. And you had people who claimed to be old heads. Oh, why do they have to have this? Blah blah blah. And then you have new people who are mad about it. And I'm sitting here going, this is old. Redeemed evil characters have existed for a long time. I still have a copy of 3.0 or 3.5's Book of Exalted Deeds, which had redeemed characters. That's literally just part of how it is. I don't know if it's going to be in a separate, like, Book of Exalted Deeds book, which I think it should be. But... I don't know, I get the feeling we're not... I think there is currently a Book of Exalted Deeds, but I don't know if we have a Book of Vile Darkness, and I don't think we'll get one. Because old 3.0, 3.5 Book of Vile Darkness had, you know, some hardcore stuff in it, and just with how people are, how the vocal part of the community is, I can't imagine they're gonna take too much of it. You know, it covered drug addiction, it covered possession, it covered torture. It had essentially how to make a bad guy. You know, how to make a character you really hate and look forward to just obliterating. Which I can appreciate, you know. I think a lot of the times... people try to make either sympathetic villains, which work, but I think it's a fine line. You know, you can have sympathetic villains, but you can't make all of them sympathetic. Nor can you make all of them, you know, the poor misunderstood character. No. It is I guess it's my view of the world, but some people are just evil. You know, simple as that. You know, you see those videos of, like, making a killer, and it'll be like, oh yeah, poor little Jimmy Murderface would punch animals whenever he had a chance, but by the time he was 4, and set dogs on fire, and you're like, there's no rational thing. That is pure evil. You know, say what you will, that is a child who is absolute evil incarnate. And acting like it's anything but is a bit ludicrous. There is no sympathy on that. But I think from that, there's a lot to take in from that, and a lot of ideological things that come into how some people perceive villainous characters. Which I always find a bit amusing, because you look at like Cyberpunk, and people will make the most villainous corporations, or what they deem villainous, you know. Oh, the corporation makes me pay my debt. Oh, things like that. Instead of, you know, actual villainy. And using Cyberpunk as an example, imagine if there was a corporation, kind of like how MaxTac hires cyber psychos and kind of rehabs them. Imagine if there was a corporation that did that, but they never really rehabbed them. They would just kind of juice them up with a ton of tranquilizers and antipsychotics, but just enough to keep them sane, so that if they ever left or didn't do what the company felt, they could just stop supporting the person, the cyber psycho, and they'd instantly just lapse into psychosis. Or potentially doing that intentionally as a way to have some dude ready to Hulk out and fight at any moment. You know, evil can be done in that way. And I think that's actually a really interesting way of creating an evil group or character. Hey! Did you see that little Nurgling? That was mine. That's cool. So, I actually had that okay, that explains it. I was wondering, I must have accidentally hit it and laid this out. Because I was gonna say, I got a little Nurgling dude. What's this one do? Oh yeah, that one kind of sucks. Over here, I'm gonna slap you. Wow, that sword swing. I mean, I get it, I don't have anything built for it. Did you see the Nurgling there? That was kind of cool. See, if that was on, say, a staff, that Nurgling ability would be just insane. But because I have to melee, or at least have that set up out, and honestly the damage kind of sucks on those abilities, and I have nothing put into melee, it's kind of bad right now. That'd be cool to see on the Tech Adept, honestly. Because I'd love to make him more of a minion mancer. But yeah, going back to evil characters, there's a lot of interesting ways you can do evil. Oh, speaking of evil, just remembered. Saw a thing on Twitter. Once again, people are dumb. And it's funny. Because someone's like, oh, list of things that Warhammer could do if they got rid of some of the fascist undertones. I'm like, already. I'm sitting here like, are you shitting me? We're really gonna pull the fascist undertones card? And the first thing they list, friendly gene stealer cults. And they go on to argue. And they're like, oh, I know more about 40K than you do. I'm like, apparently not, because you're dumb as sand. If you knew more about 40K, you would know that the gene stealer cults exist entirely to form a psychic beacon to draw a hive fleet to a planet. They exist for no other purpose. Their reproduction cycle essentially is always return to gene stealer. Gotta steal them genes. There's no redemption. There's no good because they're essentially a hive mind still. Then they had hiring orc mercenaries with the promise of teeth and battles. And I was like, oh, you mean like they already have? Because I believe it's the Bloody Axes. They're the first orc tribe or group that ended up in contact with humanity, and they became mercenaries to the point where other orc groups don't trust them because they think they're a little too human for their liking. There was that. There was human Eldar hybrids and alliances, and I was like, well, there are human Eldar alliances, those exist. And the hybrids, they're genetically incompatible, although I think Malkador, way back in the Horus Heresy, I want to say, had a weird hybrid clone thing. It's there, it's just kind of a lore bit I think they just haven't bothered to retcon yet. And also, it's kind of a one-off. But I just thought it was hilarious. This person saying, oh, I know more about all this than you. I didn't interact with it because I was like, you cannot be this ignorant without either being malicious or just flat out lying. People are like, oh, I read a book. It's like, just read the wiki. Seriously, if you're that interested in 40K, just go to the Lexicanum wiki. That is what I would do. I still do that sometimes. I'll be like, oh, let's look at chaos weapons. Just start jumping around. Oh, axe of whatever. Okay, let's see what this is about. Oh, I'll just go through list of Space Marine chapters and just start reading. Oh, this name sounds cool. What's these guys' deal? Okay, they took part in this battle. Seems like there's a lot going on here. Click on the battle. Read the page. Oh, this world. Oh, that's a tomb world. Well, let's see more about what a tomb world specifically is. Oh, here's a list of them and a description. Oh, I'm going to keep hopping around. That is what you do. Reading one book of Gaunt's Ghosts doesn't make you suddenly a lore aficionado. Doesn't make you an authority. It just makes you a person who read a book. It's annoying, but I also think it's funny because it's just, I remember there was a picture someone posted where it was just this character looking, and they're like, oh, look at you being all dumb and shit. And that's all I can think of when I see that stuff. So, that is all for now. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit the like button. Helps out the channel a lot. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for finally popping up, rewards.